It started life as a company called SAID, which stood for the Italian Darroch Automobile Company. But, like so many startups even 100 years ago, it wasn't long before it began to falter. Drastic action was needed to save it. The Italian directors bought out the French interests, Darroch, and renamed it the Lombardy Automobile Factory, the initials of which in Italian are ALFA. The year was 1910. Looking back over its century of existence, the Alphas, made between the wars from 1920 until 1940, are among the most stylish, innovative, sophisticated and desirable automobiles ever produced. Arguably, one of the greatest from this period was the 2500 SS 6C, and thanks to the historic and vintage team, the world has regained an example of this sensational motorcar.
This is a 6C 2500 SS Alpha of 1939-1940. It's a recreation of the works racing car that the factory built to run in the Mille Miglia and at the Le Mans 24-hour race. They, the year before, they'd produced a coupe version of a Grand Prix car. So this car was the first, what we now call a Grand Touring car. They called it a saloon car, but it's actually the first of the GT cars. And the reason that the owner wanted a recreation of this is pretty obvious, because when you have a good look at it, it's got all the key design features that we see in a lot of cars that came after that date. So it's really the first GT racing car that was campaigned by the factories, any of the factories.
But it's not a total recreation, is it? Because you had the original engine and chassis and that to work with?
That's right. The body is a recreation which we made, but mechanically it's identical to the way the cars were raced. It's got fully independent suspension. It's a 6-cylinder, 2.5 litre twin cam motor with a dry sump. And we can have a look at that here. So mechanically, it's identical. In fact, the performance and all the horsepower and whatnot is about the same as the factory had when they raced the car.
You built this from photographs, is that right?
Photographs, that's correct. Yeah.
No plans?
No plans. We built it from photographs.
As much as it was a challenge rebuilding the engine and running gear, recreating the body was the real achievement. In that era, the bodies from works cars were often removed and destroyed at the end of a racing season, ready for the next year's version, so only photos, and not very many of them, were available of how the car originally looked. First, a small model was produced. Then things got bigger.
From the small model, a bigger buck was made, and the reason they made a buck for this was so important to get the shapes, the external shapes right, but also we've made this the same way that the Touring made the cars, and that's in what they call a superleggera tube, so that the actual frame is made first and then the aluminium panels are moulded over the top. So when you look inside the car, it's very much like an aeroplane construction of that period. Touring were involved in the design and manufacture of aeroplanes, and they invented this tubular structure construction. So you make a tubular frame, and you can see in the roof the tubes, and then the aluminium panels are formed over it and folded and rolled over the edge. So that's what holds the aluminium on. Actually, the rolled edge is round there.
More than a couple of weeks' work, I think.
A little bit more than that.
How much
probably
more?
About 3,000 hours of work went into this car. Detail, it's got copies of the correct seats, all the instruments, the original style of instruments, headlights are the original and the filler caps and also tail lights, all original.
Paul won't actually say as much, but this is virtually the only example of this classic Alpha now in existence. He will, however, admit to it being the only one in Australia, and he and the HVR team are justifiably proud of their efforts and the work involved in drawing together the myriad bits and pieces that have gone into this project.
While we were working on the car, we were continually chasing up bits and pieces, and you can be lucky. We were lucky with some components. We got them, readily. In fact, the carburettors on the car are the period carburettors from that period. They're DCO3 Webers, sand cast. They're all handmade, and they're extremely hard to get hold of. In fact, the components that we had to actually make all our own jetting for them, because you can't buy the jets. They're not like the modern Weber carburetor. They look like them, but they're not. So fortunately, having our own rolling road here, we were able to spend some time and tune it and make all the jets to suit the engine.
You must be very proud of the way it looks now.
Oh yeah, it's very exciting to see it, but it's more exciting to drive it. It's a fantastic car to drive, and it gives the owner a lot of pleasure, which is even better, but a lot of other people, because in Australia we don't normally get to see such rare cars of this type. There are very few of them.
Not content with one truly unique Alpha, the HVR team are working on the recreation of another. Again, they're working from photos and drawings, and no doubt the end result will be just as spectacular.
This is a 6C. Essentially, the chassis that we see here is the same as under that car. This is a 6C 2300mm, which means that it's a super sports model. It's made for sports car and for racing. It's very interesting to see it sort of in its naked form. You can see that it has independent front suspension, which is very advanced for that period. Also, it has independent rear suspension with swing axles and torsion bars. Again, that's very advanced for that period.
Slightly earlier period, this is mid-30s, isn't it?
Yeah, 35. That's 35, but essentially they're the same car. This was only a progression. This one will be slightly different in that it's got a supercharger, and that we're proposing to build a sports car body on, and these are the initial prototype type drawings.
And once again, you're basically building from photographs and drawings.
We're building from photographs and drawings, and these are the initial drawings.
Give us that top one, show us the. Okay, right.
So we can see that what we're doing is this is a body that was actually used on period Alpha racing cars, and so what we're doing is adapting it to this chassis now, and like the coupe, it's a touring design, and they were really the preeminent designers of the sports cars in that period.
Paul estimates that it will take around 9 months to build the body and get it to the stage where it's complete with all fittings and finished paintwork. And while that's happening, work will proceed on the mechanical restoration of the original engine and the assembly and refurbishment of all of the other elements that will turn these drawings into a living, breathing 1930s classic.
These ones are actually scale drawings, so we've actually got the sizes here. There's the owner to scale. We know that he can fit in the car. So what we'll be doing from this one is blowing this up to full size. So we'll blow this up to actual full size, and then we can test to make sure that we've got the scale and dimensions right. In a physical way, we can actually sit in the chassis. We can actually we'll make our patterns for the mudguards and the bodywork, and then again we can make sure that everything's going to fit together. Now once we're satisfied that we've got the dimensions and the scale right, we'll make further patterns of the mudguards and the rest of the bodywork, and then we'll go into manufacturing the panels. There's no wood in this car at all. It'll have very light metal structures inside to support the panelling. This lifts up for the spare wheel. The spare wheel sits in there, so that's why that shape's like that. So that panel will lift up, and then it has a petrol tank sitting in the middle over the back axle. That's it. There's not much room for anything else in it. That's it.
For most of us, only a lotto win stands between where we are now as enthusiasts and being the proud owners of $1 million classic. But at the end of the day, it's all about the passion we have for the great automobiles of the past, whether we're owners or just appreciators of other people's good fortune.